Okay, good morning all of you. So we are going to continue with angle of deviation of a prism. So that was the topic in our last session, and we are going to continue with that angle of deviation of a prism. Now today the discussion will be that what are the factors which affect the angle of deviation of a prism. That will be the topic. So, first factor is of course the angle of incidence itself. A ray is incident on a prism, so the angle of incidence itself is a factor, right? So, the angle of incidence and angle of deviation, how are they related? Now, there is a very strange relation. The relation is something like this, that if you go on increasing the angle of incidence, initially the angle of deviation goes on decreasing. So initially, as you increase the angle of incidence, the angle of deviation goes on decreasing initially. After some time, the angle of deviation reaches the lowest possible value, right? It achieves the lowest possible value, and after that it continues to rise. So this is the graph of angle of deviation versus angle of incidence. So as the angle of incidence increases, initially the angle of deviation decreases, it reaches a minimum value, and after that it starts rising again. So number one, with angle of incidence, angle of deviation first decreases, reaches a minimum, and then increases. So this is number one. So at minimum deviation, angle of incidence will be equal to angle of emergence, and R1 will be equal to R2. So at minimum deviation, the angle of minimum deviation will be twice the angle of incidence minus the vertical angle of the prism. So minimum angle of deviation is 2i minus a. So we can also say that the angle of incidence is minimum deviation plus a by 2. See, basically what happens is that angle of deviation is I1 plus angle of incidence plus angle of emergence minus a. This is the formula. So in this formula, when it is minimum deviation, I and E both are equal, so it will become 2i minus a. So I will be minimum deviation plus a by 2. And one more thing. So R1 plus R2 is equal to a. And R1 and R2 both are equal. So R1 equal to R2 equal to a by 2. So the refractive index will be sine of a plus minimum deviation by 2 divided by sine of a by 2. So this will be the formula for the refractive index, sine of a plus minimum deviation by 2 divided by sine of a by 2. So this is the formula to find the refractive index using angle of minimum deviation. Okay, number two factor is refractive index of the prism. So it is like this: greater the refractive index, greater is the deviation. So this is factor number 2. Greater is the refractive index, greater is the deviation. Then we come to number 3. Greater is the angle of the prism, greater is the deviation. Greater the angle of deviation, greater is the angle of the prism, greater the deviation. And number 4, actually refractive index of violet is greater than refractive index of red. So violet will produce greater deviation than red. So greater refractive index, the greater will be the deviation. So these are the 4 factors affecting the angle of deviation. So now, yes, this is this is class 10 syllabus. That is right. Okay, so the first question. I is 48 degree. First question is, yes, some of the sessions are a bit advanced, but mostly the sessions are strictly according to class 10. Some of the sessions are a bit advanced, but most of the sessions are strictly according to class 10. Okay, so basically, if the angle of incidence is 48 degree and angle of the prism is 60 degree, you have to find the minimum deviation. That is number 1. And number 2, if the minimum deviation is 36 degree, then what is the angle of incidence for an equilateral prism? So there are 2 homework questions. First question is that if the angle of incidence is 48 degree, angle of the prism is 60 degree, what is the minimum deviation? Second question is that if the minimum deviation is 36 degree, what is the angle of incidence for an equilateral prism? So these are the 2 homework questions, and you can submit the homework by 9 p.m. of Wednesday. Yes, actually some of the things that we are doing in this session are a little bit ahead of the curriculum. I agree with you, but most of it is within the curriculum. Some of it is definitely ahead of the curriculum. You are right. So these are the 2 homework questions. You please do it by 9 p.m. Wednesday. Thanks a lot. Bye all of you. I'll end now.